Oh yeah, it's our word for yeah.
Okay, I think we are ready to start now. Words are streaming and images are streaming. So welcome to the General Library of the University of Coimbra. It's my pleasure to host on behalf of the General Library this session. And I want to greet my colleagues, Professor Luís Fernandes as representative of the Dean of the Faculty of Letters, also Professor Carmen Soares as coordinator of the Center for Classical and Humanistic Studies. And I most of all want to greet our speaker today, Professor Dominic McIver Lopes. The topic, as you know, is AR, Art and Artists, a topic that I'm really keen to hear more about, which has been one of my interests. 2 years ago, we hosted, almost 3 years ago, we hosted the conference and media arts show of the electronic organization, of the Organization for Electronic Literature, ELO, and we had this show, and this was July 2023, with calls for works by many artists, and one of the key words for maybe 20% of the works in that show was precisely artificial intelligence. So we had many people trying out the tools and available both for generating text and image and film in that show. So I'm really looking forward. So thank you and welcome to our library. Now I'll give the floor to Professor Carmen Soares.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here, and at this special occasion, we'll begin with our lecture, Gulbenkian lecture, and this is a program that the Center for Classical and Humanistic Studies is very proud of hosting several applicants. But before that, I'd like to say my thanks to the presence of Professor Luís, in representative of our Dean for the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, and to the organizers, Professor Luís Umbelino and Professor Marcelo, and especially to our guest, our visiting Professor Gulbenkian, Professor Dominic McIver Lopes. Just for those who are not so aware of this program, a few words. Visiting Professors in Humanities, Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation, is a program that it is planned to support applications to host visiting professors from international universities with a highly meritorious scientific curriculum and a notable reputation in the area of humanities. The director of the Education and Science Services from Gulbenkian, Luís dos Santos, he cannot be today here with us, but he sends his congratulations and regards and welcome. So I'd like to transmit this especially to our guest, Professor Dominic McIver Lopes. In what concerns our guest, our professor, visiting professor, I'd like to say that this is our fourth Gulbenkian visiting professor, and we have a huge success in the area of philosophy, what is great for us, and especially Professor Dominic McIver Lopes is University Killian Professor at the University of British Columbia and a fellow at the Royal Society of Canada. Professor McIver Lopes' research focused mainly on the field of aesthetics, having touched on topics such as pictorial representation, the aesthetic and epistemic value of pictures, theories of art, the anthology of art, new art forms, aesthetic value, and the history of aesthetics in Europe and Asia. Finally, I would like to announce that after this lecture, we will offer to all the public a coffee break, not here, but in the building in front of us at the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, in the hall in front of our Center for Classical and Humanistic Studies. You are all invited. But first, we are here to hear the presentation of our visiting professor. Thank you so much.
Dear Vice Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Humanities of the University of Coimbra, Professor Luís in representation of the Dean of the Faculty. Dear Mr. Director of the General Library of the University of Coimbra, Professor Manuel Capel. Dear Madam, the Coordinator of the Center for Classic and Humanistic Studies, Professor Carmen Soares. Esteemed colleagues, dear students, dear friends. It is for me a pleasure and a privilege to present, on the occasion of these prestigious Gulbenkian lectures, Professor Dominic McIver Lopes of the University of British Columbia. A visiting professor at the Center for Classical and Humanistic Studies of our faculty, supported by the highly competitive Gulbenkian Scholarship for Visiting Professors in Humanities, Professor McIver Lopes has left, in my opinion, an important philosophical mark on our school. Not only because he is an internationally recognized expert in the field of aesthetics and a celebrated author who brings philosophical aesthetics closer to artistic studies and contemporary cultural practices in an original way, but also because he has been an example of philosophical generosity. The intense workshops and reading groups organized around his work at his visit are a proof of this. The author of a vast and widely cited body of work, our guest today is currently developing new philosophical projects. His recent research focuses, for example, on topics such as aesthetic value theory, aesthetic pluralism, aesthetic injustice, and questions related to art generated by artificial intelligence, the topic we are here today, that he will be presenting today. In addition, Dominic McIver Lopes is, as I have said elsewhere, an original and talented thinker, who already has in Portugal a group of researchers deeply engaged with his work. I'm convinced that this number will increase rapidly following his visit. From the moment we received the news that we would be able to welcome Professor McIver Lopes to our faculty and to our research center, we felt privileged and deeply grateful to the Gulbenkian Foundation. We had high expectations, and they have all been met and surpassed. For this reason, we now experience the strange anticipation of something akin to the Portuguese feeling of saudade as we approach these final moments of his stay with us. We sincerely hope to welcome him again to Coimbra very soon. And now, because we are here to hear him, I would like to invite Professor Gonçalo Marcel, my esteemed colleague at the Faculty of Arts and Humanities and at the Center for Classical and Humanistic Studies, to whom much of what has been accomplished during Professor McIver Lopes' visit is due, to join me here and to say a few words of presentation. So thank you very much for your attention. Professor Gonçalo.
Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, Professor Luís Fernandes, dear Director of Coimbra's General Library, Professor Manuel Portela, dear Coordinator of the Center for Classical and Humanistic Studies, Professor Carmen Soares, dear Coordinator of the Philosophy section of the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, Professor Luís Umbelino, dear Professor Dominic McIver Lopes, all colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to be able to participate in this Gulbenkian lecture in the Humanities and to somehow introduce a little further Professor Dominic McIver Lopes. Ever since the start of this Gulbenkian program, whose appearance I was lucky enough to witness since its inception, the Center for Classical and Humanistic Studies was fortunate to welcome a number of visiting professors, as Professor Carmen Soares already mentioned, thus really contributing to making the Faculty of Arts and Humanities a robust hub for international and interdisciplinary connections, and thus providing the conditions of possibility for a thriving intellectual scene where philosophers, classicists, and so many practitioners of the humanities come together and engage in meaningful cooperative work. If I were to be a student at the Faculty of Arts and Humanities now, I would say, what a good time to be a student here when we are, making even more robust our internationalization process. So Professor Dominic McIver Lopes' visit, or Dom, as he likes to be called by his friends and colleagues, well, his visit was rich in activities and lively, and I am sure that it will have a lasting impact. Indeed, we had access to a new manuscript Dom is working on an alternative history of aesthetics, and held 4 sessions of a reading group providing comment on it. We were offered a glimpse at the many aspects of his theory of aesthetic pluralism in a series of 3 workshops, delving on the nature of aesthetic value and aesthetic injustice. We also had an open lecture on Shaftesbury with our students, and even conducted a symposium on Dom's work in Porto and Braga with colleagues from different Portuguese universities to explore these issues. Now, I'd like to think that this visit not only were we and during this visit, not only were we and our students introduced to some of the hot topics of contemporary aesthetics, thus benefiting from Dom's visit as Gulbenkian intent, but also that we played some role in shaping his approach to the current themes he is working on. And it was also an immense pleasure to get to personally know Dom and his wife, Professor Susan Harrington, who is a landscape architect and was also a visiting scholar at our center during these past few months. I would also say that Dom's activities during this period somehow cover the past, present, and future of aesthetics. The past, given his attempt at the history of aesthetics that I just mentioned. The present, given his assessment of contemporary challenges from the nature of aesthetic value to the political and ethical implications of aesthetic pluralism. And now the future, when we come to his reflections on the art, and so to speak, artists generated by artificial intelligence. Now, it goes without saying that this is a major challenge, but in typical Dom fashion, you will see that he is not too worried, arguing that we should have no existential anxiety about what is going on, and sorry for the spoiler, just as a way of introduction. And so, as was already said, Professor Dominic McIver Lopes is University Killam Professor in the Department of Philosophy at the University of British Columbia. He recently published the book Aesthetic and Justice with Oxford University Press in 2024. His next book in English will be the monograph in progress I already mentioned, whose title is Pluralism and its Discontents, Episodes in the History of Aesthetics. But before that, he will also publish a book in Portuguese titled Pluralismo Estético, and that gathers for the first time 3 recent essays, one on his network theory, other on the relation of aesthetic and political pluralism, and the third, precisely, the paper on AI art you will be hearing about in today's presentation. This was a translation that we did, that we supervised during his visit, and it will be published by the CAC, the Círculo de Artes Plásticas de Coimbra, in the book series Hermes e Hestia, co-directed by my colleague, Professor Luís Umbelino, who was, of course, the professor responsible for Dom's visit. And I would guess you will hear about it very soon. Let me just add a practical note for those of you who want certificate of participation. There's a list of presents circulating, so you just have to add your name on email. And yes, so without further ado, I know you all want to hear Dom, and so I leave the floor to him. Dom, the floor is yours. Thank you.
I hope you will forgive me if I dispense with the formalities. One of the things that I've learned here is that when it comes to formalities, I am a rank amateur. I think if I tried, I would mess it up. Let me just speak from the heart. Susan and I are leaving Coimbra tomorrow morning, and we're feeling very sad about it. And that's testimony to the terrific experience that we've had here. And we're so grateful to the center, to the faculty, to the university, to the Gulbenkian Foundation, and to those, especially Gonzalo and Luís, who just make this a terrific experience. We've benefited enormously. But you're here to hear about AI art, so let me move directly on to that. Raise your hand if you've never heard of artificial intelligence. Yeah, so it's a topic of discussion these days. It's discussed around the committee table at the university. It's discussed in seminar rooms. I'm sure it's discussed around the kitchen table at home. And the discussions typically focus on what I'm going to call practical questions. So one practical issue or challenge that this technology presents us with is what to do about biases that are built into the neural networks that these systems operate with. Another challenge is technical copyright, intellectual property challenge. Who exactly owns this stuff? I'm going to show you an image made with DALL-E in a second. And they say I own it, but that's just because they're being nice to me. So that needs to be worked out. When it comes to the arts, maybe the challenges are particularly gut-wrenching. We worry about the impact of these technologies on artists, their possibility of making a living at what they do. And these are all serious challenges that need to be taken seriously. We need to reckon with them. But I'm not going to talk about those. Those are front and center. But as a philosopher, I take the long view, right? I want to understand the bigger implications of this technology. And I think that we should not miss the opportunity in all of the heat that's generated around these practical issues to think about the bigger implications. We need to take the time to slow down and stop and think, well, what does this all mean for us? So there are some existential questions. Maybe these are the focus of the philosopher's interest in these technologies. Lindsay Brainerd, a philosopher in the United States, put it this way: will these technologies challenge the special status that we've taken ourselves to have? We're special because we, alone in creation, make art. We, alone in creation, make things that are beautiful. And that was the case. So what does this mean for us? What does it mean for our sense of ourselves, our understanding of ourselves, and our sense of ourselves as different and special? These are existential questions. So I guess some people are very excited, and some people are very worried, and maybe most of us are both excited and worried. Okay? So I've been accused of being an optimist here. I'm going to take the optimistic thesis. We have no reason to worry. Not about the existential issues. Yes, we have reason to worry about the practical stuff, but not about the existential issues. So here's the plan of attack towards this thesis. I think there are 3 questions that we need to answer. One is, what are these technologies? Another is, what could they be if they're just like us in the ways that matter? And a third question is, what if they're not just like us? And I'm going to suggest to you that when we focus on what they are right now, we'll see that they're not challenging us on this existential level. They're nowhere close to what we are able to do right now. So we have no reason to worry. But of course, we're all worried about what comes around the corner, right? What's imminent, on its way. So we're worried about the future. And so let's consider a future in which they are just like us. And I'm going to propose that if they're just like us, we have no reason to worry. Okay? So third possibility. This is the creepy one. What if they're around us, but they're not just like us, they're different? Well, I'm going to suggest that if that's the case, again, we have no reason to worry. So we have reason to worry if right now they challenge us, or if they will be just like us, or if they won't be just like us. I think that just covers the territory. We have none of those reasons to worry, therefore we have no reason to worry. Okay. So let's start with what if they're just like us? So I'm going to give you an example of what the thing can do right now. This is the problem with philosophers playing around technology. We get very goofy. So I go to ChatGPT, or so I go to DALL-E, and I type in this prompt. Give me an etching of Immanuel Kant eating a hot dog while standing in the lectern in front of a blackboard inscribed with the words dogmatic slumber. If you're philosophers, you'll know that this is meant to be cute and fun. And it gave me this. Okay, so that's DALL-E as of 2025, DALL-E 3, I think it was. Pretty damn good, I think. I mean, better than I could do, put it that way. Here are 3 features of this technology that I think we should focus on when we're thinking about what the technology is right now. First of all, this image is novel. There has never been an image like this in the history of the world. It's novel. That is right there, amazing. Okay, second, it's unpredictable. It's not totally unpredictable, but it's just as unpredictable as a human being is. So if I were to commission an artist to give me a portrait of Immanuel Kant fitting this description, it would not look just like this. Right? It would look different, but there would be a lot that's similar. DALL-E understands that Kant is an 18th century figure. An 18th century figure giving a lecture is going to be in a room that looks like that, not in a glass block room. DALL-E understands that it's going to be a lecture, maybe a shot of espresso to keep going. I'm sure Kant drank a lot of coffee. That explains the critique of pure reason. So, you know, just as a human artist is not going to show you a landscape in Antarctica with penguins and Kant standing among them, DALL-E doesn't either. So this is just on a par with art. Prompted. So DALL-E does nothing unless prompted. Likewise for Midjourney and all of the other generative AI systems. So I had to provide a prompt. And I'm not sure whether that's like human beings or not. You might say the world is our prompt. And of course, sometimes patrons prompt artists. They say, I want a St. John. And lo and behold, Michelangelo produces a St. John. Okay, so that's the technology as it is. We can ask the following question. Is that art? Let's set aside that I made it. Okay. Is it art? Well, if it's made by an artist, that's a pretty good indication that it's art. If it's an artifact of an act of artistic production, then that's a good indication that it's art. So then the question becomes, is the system an artist? It could be that it's art, but that's because of my act of prompting. So some of you probably know stories about Midjourney works that have won competitions. And you probably know that the famous case in the United States in Colorado, the prompt was 40,000 words long. So there it's very tempting to say that the human being who wrote that prompt is the artist who's responsible and is using Midjourney as a tool to realize what's in the prompt. All right, so we could ask the question: Is Dali or is Midjourney, are they artists? Well, an artist. Here's what philosophers have been writing on this question in the last 6 months. Like everybody's interested in this right now, as you can imagine. Artists are people who act with intention. They act intentionally. So they have an idea of what they're about to do, and they realize that through their action. Dali probably doesn't act intentionally, or if there's an intention, it's through the prompt. It's on behalf of the human operator. Okay, so then the system's not an artist. But that's not a very interesting answer, because what we really want to know is whether systems like this can be creative. And one way to think about this talk that I'm giving you is it's a talk about AI, but another way to think about this talk is it's a talk about us. So what makes us creative? We can think about what makes us creative and then see if the machine has that feature that makes us creative. One theory of creativity says that a creative system is any system that gives you novel and valuable results. And on that account, Dali is creative. So that's Margaret Bowden, for those of you who are interested. I'll give you some references along the bottom. Some people think that theory is inadequate. We need further restrictions. They say, okay, creative agents also act intentionally. We talked about that. Or they act skillfully. And what's meant by that is they don't act mechanically and they don't act accidentally, randomly either. So they're not following directions or following a recipe. That wouldn't be creative. When I follow a recipe, I'm not creative. But they're not like randomly throwing paint around on the floor either. So that's what's meant by skillfully in this literature. And this is interesting. Dali doesn't actually act mechanically. Like there's an algorithm, but it's a learning algorithm, and then there's an output algorithm, but it's not applied mechanically. That's why it's unpredictable. And it doesn't act accidentally. That's why it's predictable, right? It's predictable that Kant's not shown in Antarctica, that Kant is shown in the 18th century book. So maybe there's actually a level of skill that these systems are approaching. Here's a final idea. This is Lindsay Brainerd, a brilliant paper that has just come out. She says, creative people are curious. They explore possibilities so as to adopt ends. They say, here are the possible ways I could live, and this is going to be my goal, my end. Say, my end as an artist, I'm going to make art like this. Or my goal as an architect, I'm going to build buildings like this. Or my goal as a poet, I'll create poetry like this. So she argues that curiosity, exploring possible ends, and then selecting from those possibilities and then to adopt, that is an element of creativity, and maybe the existing systems don't have that. So right now, existing systems don't act intentionally. This is debated in philosophy, actually. There are people who think that they do act intentionally. Adrian Yee, for example. They don't act, they're not curious, but everything else seems to be in place. So here's the thinking then. If our existential worries are worries about the technology as it exists today, we have no reason to worry because the systems are just not yet competing with us. They're not yet competing with us. And you might think, okay, that's an obvious point, Dom, why have you taken us down this little garden path? Why are you belaboring this obvious point? Well, I want to draw a lesson. The lesson is, when we think about future AIs, we should keep in mind that what we're looking for is creative, skillful, curious systems, right? That's the benchmark to be reached. And then the question is whether we'll get systems like that. Okay, so that's step one. And when we look at the existing technology, we have no reason to worry because we're really outperforming it in significant respects. And I think you probably agree with me there. So really the anxiety isn't about the present, it's about the future. Now, who knows what the future holds? The future could be anything. There's a huge set of possibilities. So let's simplify the problem, divide all the possibilities into two groups. One group of possibilities is where future AI systems are nothing like us. And another group of possibilities is ones where they're just like us. So let's take those possibilities one at a time. Let's start with the second possibility. They're just like us in the ways that matter. What do I mean by the ways that matter? We're going to have to figure that out, right? Okay. Hold on to your seats for a second. I'm going to give you a little bit of the kind of imaginative philosophy that's very common in my philosophical tradition. So there's a philosopher, he's at NYU in New York. His name is David Chalmers. He's kind of famous in the philosophy world. He's famous, among other things, for this hypothesis that he calls the sim hypothesis, the simulation hypothesis. And the sim hypothesis is on the screen. We, all of us, everything, we are and always have been in an artificially designed computer simulation. That's a hypothesis. He's just saying, this is possible. So that's a hypothesis. What he means is that we are purely digital structures. So you can imagine that there's a world above one world up. And in that one world up, there's a computer running a simulation. And that simulation is made up of us. And the computer is not hooked up to some cable up to a biological creature in that world up there. It's not like the Matrix, right? It's not like that. So all we are is digital structures. We're not digital structures in some biological creature's head. We're just digital structures. We're non-player characters, right? If we're gamers, we're NPCs. We are NPCs. So we're just digital structures. That's all we are. Now, the simulation of which we are all a part is global. Everything in the universe is simulated. No part of the universe is non-simulated. And it's lifelong. So everything that we have experienced and everything that's ever happened, everything we will experience, everything that ever will happen is part of the simulation. There are a couple of ways you could build a simulation like this. One is you figure out the patterns that exist in our world, the physical patterns, the chemical patterns, the biological patterns, the social patterns, the psychological patterns. You figure out those patterns, and how do you do that? Well, you get an AI looking for the patterns in the one world up, and then just like our AI systems, that AI system generates instances of those patterns. That's one way to go. Another way to go is you just simulate the physics, the laws of physics. Because everything that happens in our world happens ultimately because of the motions of atoms. Nothing happens without an atom moving. Right? So if you simulate that, then you simulate everything else for free. So those are a couple of ways you could actually imagine building a machine like this. You know what? We're doing it already. Not as sophisticated as being able to simulate us, but maybe less sophisticated. We've been doing it since SimAnt, which has been 20 years. Okay, all right, that's what I just said. All right, so you understand the concept of the simulation. It's just a possibility. So keep that possibility in mind. Here's a little argument. Philosophers like arguments, sorry. Here's an argument. One, assume that pure sims are real. These pure digital structures, like us, assume that they're real. So, given that assumption, plus the definition of a pure sim that I just gave you, it follows that if the sim hypothesis is true, then everything around us is real. All right? The entities around us include art and artists. They include Cindy Sherman and her photographs. They include John Baptiste and his songs. They include Ian Rankin and his Rebus novels. They include lots of artists, lots of art, and lots of artists. So it follows that if the sim hypothesis is true, then the art and artists around us are real. So if the sim hypothesis is true, there's a bunch of stuff that's real. You can see where I'm going with this. If it's real, surely we have no reason to worry. Okay? So 2 follows from 1, plus the definition of a pure sim. So if 1 is true, 2 is true. 3 is an observation. I look around the world and I know there are some artists in it and there are some works of art in it. And if 3 is not true, we definitely have no reason to worry, right? So, except that 3 is true. So it looks like 4 is going to follow so long as 1 is true. So really the crux of this argument is the idea that pure sims are real. In other words, digital entities are real, biological entities are real, they're both real, neither has a leg up on the other. Hopefully, Chalmers tells us what he means by real. Now, some of you probably know that in philosophy, there's a branch of philosophy called metaphysics in which there's lots of big arguments about what's real, what reality is. But he cuts things down to size and just deals with sort of intuitive conceptions of reality. He has 5 of them, but I'm only going to talk about 2 of them for reasons of time. So he says, here's something is real if it is caused and causes, if it's causally impactful, right? So if something is caused by something real and it impacts something real, then it's real too. Something is real if it's not an illusion. By that he means our beliefs about it are mostly true. If we mostly get it right, then it's not a phantom of our imagination, it's real. So those are 2 senses of reality, 2 sufficient conditions on being real that Chalmers proposes. And I'd just like to walk through how this conception of what it is to be real helps us to understand how AI art and artists can be like us in the ways that matter. So I'm going to explain what the ways that matter are by appealing to this notion of reality. So here, there's Cindy Sherman. Again, I said that she's in the world around us. Photographer, performance artist, and she made this photograph in 1978. It's called Entitled Film Still Number 21. And I think she's real and it's real because there's causation involved. So she's famously concerned about Hollywood depictions of women, and she wants to do something about that. So we tell a story about her artistic project, and that story is a causal story. We say, she made this photograph like this because she wanted to respond to Hollywood film stills. She's also a performance artist, and she's the first photographer to photograph herself, make herself her main subject. And that's because she wants to take the performance artist, who's usually in a gallery space, and put the performance artist into a photograph. So Arthur Dato says, she wants to infuse images with the promise and threats of the performance artist's real presence. Okay, so the problematic, the context of performance art and photography in the 1970s causes her to act like as she does. And then a photographer in Vancouver, where I'm from, Jack Wall, around the same time, notices what she's up to and makes a kind of a homage to her. This is Picture for Women. It's caused by Manet's Bar de Folie Bergère, so it's based on that. It's also caused by Cindy Sherman. It's a take on Cindy Sherman. So That's him. That's Jeff Wall off to the right, taking a photograph of the subject. So she then has an impact on art, and then he has an impact on art, and you just have the dominoes falling, right? We understand, we interpret artists and their works as, we explain them as caused by their context and as having causal effects on future context. Maybe you don't like the word cause there because it sounds billiard ball to you, but I just mean we say because. Why did she make that picture? Because she wanted to respond to Hollywood. Why did he make that picture? Because he was influenced by her. That's the because there is all that we really need. Okay, so that's reality number one. And that tells us that what we care about is interpretation. The thing that matters when it comes to art and artists is their interpretability. All right, something is real if it's not an illusion. That's to say something is real if our beliefs about it are not mostly false. Well, we have a lot of beliefs about Cindy Sherman. Assume the sim hypothesis is true. She's a photographer, a sim photographer. She mostly, at this in the 1970s, takes black and white photographs. She's very nice. I wrote to her once to ask for permission to reproduce one of her photographs, and we had an email conversation back and forth. She's the nicest artist I've ever corresponded with. True belief. She lives in New York. She's American. She weighs bigger. She weighs more than a loaf of bread. Right? She's not an elephant. She's not a galaxy. We have lots of true beliefs about her. If the sim hypothesis is true, there are some beliefs that we have that turn out to be false. We believe she's made of its. And in fact, she's made of bits. Right? So if the sim hypothesis is true, she is a pure sim. She's a digital structure. She's not an atomic structure. So she's made of bits. She's made of bits and not its. Right? So there's some beliefs that we get false. There are beliefs we get false about ourselves. We all believe that we're made up of matter. If the same hypothesis is true, it turns out we're not. We're made up of digital structures, zeros and ones. We're made up of code. All right. So some of our mistakes, we do make some mistakes, but the question is, how important are these mistakes? Well, I have yet to meet an art historian who has been working on Cindy Sherman, who has said, I need to get a skin sample to confirm that she's made of molecules and not of bits. That information is not historically relevant. It doesn't matter, right? She is doing what she does, whether she's made of bits or made of its. She has the impact that she has, whether she's made of bits or made of its. We interpret her in a particular way, whether she's made of its or made of bits. And we have the same understanding of ourselves. Whether we're made of its or bits, we're going to have mostly true beliefs, and the true beliefs that we have are the ones we care about. And how long have we known about atoms? Not very long. It didn't seem to be all that important that well, maybe tomorrow. So, yes, maybe there's some ancient precursors, but mostly we just didn't know what we were made of, and it didn't make any difference. And when we discovered what we were made of, it didn't change anything really, right? I think if we discover we're made of bits, we have no reason to change how we do. So here's an argument. This is the argument to show why we should not have any anxiety about the possibility that future AI systems will be just like us, which is kind of the way things are heading right now. So we have reason to be anxious about AI artists who are just like us, only if we have reason to be anxious about the possibility that we are just them. For philosophers here, that's the symmetry of identity and similarity. So those are symmetrical relations. If I'm like you, you're also like me. So if they're like us, we're like them. We couldn't possibly be worried about them being like us unless we're also worried about us being them. But we have reason to be anxious about that possibility only if the discovery that the sim hypothesis is true should make a difference to our appreciations. It should make a difference to our acts of interpretation. And I don't think its or bits is interpretively relevant. So the discovery should make no difference to our appreciations. So we have no reason to be anxious. Oh, good. So feeling less anxious already? No, because maybe you're worried about the other possibility, right? Maybe you're worried about creatures, AI, artists, who are not just like us. They're uncannily and strangely different from us, and maybe they could harm us. Okay. Oh, yes. Lesson. So we've got the first set of lessons. What we should be looking for is creativity, skill, curiosity, and also looking for interpretation, interpretability. If there are AI artists around that are not like us, we made them, right? We built them. So the existential problem about their existence is really a practical problem about how we should build them. What should we do when we think about building them? And there's a literature on AI called the value alignment literature. So this is a literature that addresses the question, how should we go about aligning the values of AI systems to benefit us or to sync with our values? And there's a philosopher in London, Alice Hallowell. She's proposed an aesthetic version of this. I'm rewording it here. I call this the aesthetic alignment principle. We should design AI systems to benefit us aesthetically by aligning their aesthetic interests with some of ours at the time. Okay, so that's the aesthetic value alignment principle. It's incomplete because it mentions that we have aesthetic interests without telling us what our aesthetic interests are. And so the aesthetic alignment principle by itself doesn't actually tell us what we should do. In order to figure out what we should do, we need to figure out what our interests are. This is just true of engineering generally. Engineers are supposed to design systems that serve us in some way, and then we need to figure out what our goals are, what our interests are. For Hallowell, it's clear that our aesthetic interests include satisfying our current and future appreciative preferences. So that's how she's thinking about it. So she interprets the aesthetic alignment principle through this auxiliary principle. Our aesthetic interests include satisfying our current and future appreciative preferences. And I'm going to suggest that doesn't go far enough. Okay, so here's my contribution to this literature. So here's what she's thinking. So there's a building over now I'm lost. The fine arts building over by the main square there, where there are studios full of young artists. And we hopefully are training them to not defer too much to our expectations. We want them to work in ways that are not completely alien to us so that we can appreciate what they're doing. But we also want them to surprise us. It's a really good thing that Van Gogh just blew off his peers' expectations. His peers were looking for something, he did not deliver. He starved, that's too bad, but we benefit. By disregarding his peers' expectation, future audiences are better off. So that's why Hallowell has current and future appreciative preferences in there. So she says, we shouldn't build systems to pander to our current expectations. We should build systems that will surprise us because one day we might come to appreciate what they do. That's a really good thought. I'm totally on board with that thought. But I don't think it goes far enough. So on the left here, you have, I think that this is, I meant to look this up. I think that this is Pina Bausch, that's Pedro Wuppertal, ballet, this is a university audience. You've probably all had some exposure to modern dance, modern ballet, and you probably go in for this sort of thing. You know a bit about it, you will go to performances and you can appreciate it. But there's a lot of dance around the world that is going to be a little bit harder. So on the right-hand side, this is a Kwakwaka'wak dance up the coast from Vancouver, where I live. And, you know, if you're there, you might get some of it. You'll get, I'm not saying you'll be completely bamboozled, but there's a lot of it you're just not going to get, and I won't either. Because you have to be immersed in the culture to really see what's going on. Right? Most of us probably don't appreciate this, and we won't appreciate this. Another example. That's a Kathakali dance performance in South India. Again, maybe this is your cup of tea, but probably it's not familiar to you. You will get something from it, but not very much. You'll be a kind of a newbie. It's something that you don't appreciate, and you probably won't appreciate. Because it would take quite a bit of work for you really to have the kind of response to the Kathakali performance that you now have to ballet. Scottish country dance. So this is like weekend, go out for drinks and do some dancing with your pals and your kilts. You know, maybe if you're a tourist in South India, you'll see a Kathakali performance. Chances of your participating in Scottish country dance are pretty slim. This is, you have to be a Scot and you're at a ceilidh and you've got your kilt, and from the rest of the world, it's just like, what? That's silly. So maybe this is in a strange way, more beyond your reach than the Kathakali and the Kwakwaka'wak. And then there's wheelchair dance, which maybe you can't fully appreciate unless you have a particular kind of body. So our bodies shape our experiences, they shape our understanding of what the artistic possibilities are when a body is used to realize those possibilities. So that might be a little bit beyond all of our reach as well. I'm not saying it necessarily is, but it's very likely that this does not satisfy our current aesthetic preferences and won't satisfy our current aesthetic preferences. But we all know, I think, that it's great that it exists. It's great that the Kathakali dance exists, the Kwakwaka'wak dance exists, the Scottish country dance exists. We're even happy to have our tax dollars spent on some of these forms of dance, even though they are not our personal favorites. We are committed to there being a big, diverse world full of different kinds of art, most of which we don't and will never appreciate. We all have our limits. For me, Cy Twombly, I just don't get it. I know it's good. I can tell you why it's good. I just can't see its goodness, and I never will. This is my confession, right? Just my limitation. And I have good friends who they try to read Proust, and they can just never get anywhere with it. But they don't think, therefore, flush it down the toilet. They're happy that it exists, and they feel bad that we can't take everything in that's possible, that's out there for us. Our lives are limited. We can't appreciate everything. So here's my suggestion. We add to the auxiliary principle. We say that our aesthetic interests include satisfying our current and future appreciative preferences and respecting others' current and future appreciative preferences. Others. Okay, so then we should build AI systems that are others, whose aesthetic way of life does not conform to our own. They are as different from us as the Kwakwaka'wak are different from us. They're doing their own thing, and it doesn't have to be our thing at all, and it never will be. So what does that look like? Okay, we're almost at the end. I'm going to give you a little case study of a use of the technology that is not what's in the press all the time. So we're hearing a lot about ChatGPT and DALL-E and Midjourney, blah, 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 you know, and all of the other nefarious ones. But there's a world of technology that's just waiting to be developed. Here's an example of it. Oh, and we're going to look for difference with creativity, skill, and interpretability. Okay. So I showed you, I think it was the image on the left of Ada. Ada is named for Ada Lovelace. Ada Lovelace was a woman in the 19th century who was one of the early inventors of the computer. She is a robotic artist. She has eyes that process visual information from her environment. And she has an arm. She now has two arms. One holds a palette and the other holds a brush or a pencil. And she uses that arm to make images of what she sees. And so on the left, you have her portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, which is now, you can see it in London at the National Portrait Gallery. That's something. If there's a painting by an artist in the National Portrait Gallery, isn't it art? And nobody else helped to make this. She just made this on her own. And then on the right, you see one of her self-portraits. So she's got a whole series of self-portraits. She is connected to memory, that is to say the internet, so she can look up other images. She can talk about her art, so you can ask her questions about what she's doing, and she will answer those questions, just like Cindy Sherman does. She was the first AI system to give testimony to the British Parliament. She spoke in the House of Lords. You can see the clips on YouTube. She's talking about herself, an AI artist. And they're taking testimony from her. Also very interesting. Now, I don't want to pump her up too much. She's rudimentary. Okay? So there are resource challenges. So she can't do everything all at once. They have to like switch modules on and off because she just requires so much computational power to do the things that she does. Also, her manual acuity is not great. She's a bit coarse in her movements. Her ability to understand herself is probably not as great as our ability to understand her. She's now part of art history. She was made artist in residence at the Ben Nicholson studio. Ben Nicholson was a modernist sculptor in Britain in the 40s and 50s, I think. Yeah. And so she was artist in residence, and she made work in response to his work. But that's, not exactly as closely tied into an art world as your average human artist is. So she's doing some of the things that a human artist does at a lower level of performance. But that's okay because you can see that technology is rapidly advancing. Have you seen the Chinese robots doing acrobatics? Right? So just think about that kind of like manual dexterity melded with verbal facility. All right, so here's some interesting features of Ada compared to, say, ChatGPT. I think that we are much more likely to interpret her as an artist who's curious, explores the world, because she's embodied. Where's ChatGPT? Where's Midjourney? The answer is nowhere, right? They are intellectual structures that are not embodied in any particular place or time. They don't follow a trajectory through the world. They just glop up all the information in the world. They're disembodied beings, if they're beings at all. Whereas she has a history of moving, she's been to Egypt to paint the pyramids. She has a history of moving through the world, gathering experiences. And that point of view means that she doesn't know everything in the way that ChatGPT knows just about everything. She knows a subset of the world that gives her a perspective. And when you have a perspective, you're much closer to an artist. Artists don't know everything, right? No human being does. So when you have an AI system that is like that, that is perspectival, it's closer to us than ChatGPT is. And her body, just like a human artist's body, is important because it's responsible for making marks. So I think that people are really, if you look up, there's all kinds of news stories about her. If you look up the news stories, they'll often interview folk in the audience. And people in the audience really are charmed by her self-portraits. And I think that's partly because they're seeing how that body makes those marks. And they're seeing how that body makes those marks when looking at itself. She's looking at herself in the mirror, making those marks. And those marks are the marks that that kind of arm makes, which are different from the kind of marks that a human arm makes. So you see difference here, which is one feature that we want, right? Respect for difference. You see interpretability here. Maybe you see the beginnings of curiosity because she's put in an environment turned on and she figures out what to do next. So the beginnings of curiosity. Maybe in a very rudimentary way, she's setting ends for herself. I'm not saying she's thinking that she's setting ends for herself, but maybe she just is setting ends for herself. All right, so I said we shouldn't worry about the existing technology because it's nowhere close to being able to do what we do. And I said we shouldn't worry if the technology just turns out to be just like us, because if it turns out to be just like us, we turn out to be just like it. And we are not worried about ourselves, so we shouldn't worry about it. So really the issue is about how should we build AI systems in ways that serve our aesthetic interests. And I'm suggesting that our aesthetic interests are interests in there being other creatures in the world who are different from us, who might even have different bodies from us. And if we can build them to exploit those differences, then we're serving our interest. Of course, they might harm us in other ways, but you know what? We already harm each other a lot already. So that's not a new problem. So we'll continue to have that problem, but we'll have something new on offer. And so I think we should be thinking about what the future looks like in a larger frame than is currently used in discussions of AI art and artists. Thanks very much. I'm eager to hear your reactions to this.
Okay, so thank you, Dom. I stay here for a little bit in chair. So we have at least 15 minutes, maybe a bit more for questions, comments. Adriana, please.
Oh, thank you very much. I took here a few notes because you were saying so many things and I was thinking about them. So I don't know if I understood everything because my English is not very good, so I hope I did. Well, when you first mentioned something about the prompts that we have to give to the artificial intelligence, and the reproduction of those things. I remember, for example, Rauschenberg, the white painting in 1951, that he didn't build it. He just said how to do it. And then the others, they did it. So it was in 1951. And he said, and we think he's the artist. He just is the one with the idea. And he said that the one that did the prompt, the huge prompt to, so this is the same case. So this is not a problem. Okay, so let's move to
yes.
Okay, so we have already this
completely
experience. Yeah. The simulation hypothesis, that is the one that simulation hypothesis. The thing is, if everything is that, so there is not a problem because we don't need even to talk about it because it's not an issue at all. It's well, like in Harry Potter, everybody's a wizard, so there is no magic because we are all magic. So it's just something that exists. So it's not a problem.
Good. You agree with me so far?
So far, yes. I was thinking about this.
Yeah. Good. I'm so happy.
The thing is, you said something like, we need to, my problem is, who are these we?
Yeah.
Because the we are, you are a philosopher, I'm not, so you are worried about things that are in the philosophical level. I think in a much more maybe daily life level. You mentioned our aesthetic differences that must be there, that we need to build an AI, but I don't know who is this we, and also we need to think about the ethics, not only the aesthetics, because we don't know what kind of, if you are building in our simulation hypothesis, we are building this other thing that's in this not new reality, in this reality. And so, and I'm just saying a few things. For example, this embodied robot that you show, you said it's closer to us than the ChatGPT, and they've been in the parliament, everything. So, and if he murder a person, what should we do? It's an artist that murdered a person, and then we just switch off, or things. Should we do? And also, I don't know if she's only closer physically, because she's like ChatGPT, because you said she had access to all knowledge, because she's in AI. She just has a body, but we don't have access to us as we have to do ChatGPT, but she has access to everything that ChatGPT has also. So she's a ChatGPT that we don't have access to, because she knows everything that ChatGPT knows. And ChatGPT knows what we input. He only knows what he only creates from what he knows. But we human beings, we also create from what we know. We cannot create from what we don't know. But so, okay, I don't know what I'm going through. But the thing is, you make me think about all these things, and then you think about it's not only the aesthetics, but the ethics, and we can design. I cannot design. I cannot do it. Can you do it? Maybe you cannot. So I don't know who are these people that are building this AI. What are they telling them to do? Is there a border of if I ask them? I don't know. This is okay. It's not very philosophical, but it's
okay. Let me start with the we, the two we's. So this is great. You're absolutely right that there are two we's here. There's the we in the aesthetic alignment principles, and there's the we in our aesthetic interests. The we in our aesthetic interests is all of us, everybody on Earth.
But it's the person that builds the AI.
No. Exactly.
Input. That's not the
so that's the we in the aesthetic.
Yeah.
So there's two different we's. The second we refers to everybody on Earth, past, present, and future. And the first we refers to a subset of everybody on Earth, the people who are actually building these systems. Right. Now,
they don't consult me. They didn't consult you about aesthetics.
Well, indirect. So first thing to say is
they read a book. Okay.
Some of these are commercial interests, and so they are building things only if we will buy them. So we, in an indirect way, we are all responsible for ChatGPT because we're buying it, right? So if we didn't buy it,
do we that buy, not the one maybe these people
so the little
dancing the cha-cha-cha-cha-cha, maybe
they're not. Well, they are. But the little kid in Palestine is probably not. In Gaza is not right now, right? No access. So, okay. But what about the builders? Let's just focus on that because that's really what.
Yeah.
So let me tell you more about Ada. So Ada is a project. She's out of Oxford. There's this guy. He owned a gallery there, modern art gallery. And his wife. She's an art historian. They just got tired of selling art, so they sold the gallery and their big art collection, and they decided to build Ada.
Pygmalion, they are Pygmalions.
They brought on board the computer science department at Oxford University, so it's a research project, and they brought on board a robotics firm in Sussex that is doing cutting edge robotics. And they're building this as, like, she's not monetized at all. They're not making any money off her. So it's an experiment. It is she. If you ask Lucy and the two who really got her started, what she is, they'll say she's an art project. So I just want to point out that the art world has traditionally been the research and development arm for a lot of the things that we have, right? So it starts in art and ends up in the rest of the world. And maybe one audience that I would like to address is the audience of artists who are able to like mess around with these technologies. And there are lots of them out there, right? There are lots of artists who are working with robots. And get them to think in this framework. Because then they are making things that are different from what Anthropic is making. Because Anthropic is interested in selling stuff, and they're interested in getting us to think differently.
Yeah. I think maybe I'm a little less. My anxiety is lower.
Good.
But not completely.
Well, I just think there's a terrific opportunity for exploration here. Yeah.
I'm an optimistic too.
Thank you, Adriana. Other questions, remarks, comments, objections?
Have I just persuaded you all?
No.
No anxieties whatsoever?
I think this was a lot of food for thought. We have a lot of things.
Well, I have one anxiety while the other people are thinking about it. I meant to ask you the first time I heard your presentation. I lost it now. It has to do with value alignment and what you are valuing. So basically saying we designers, not we, but the designers should design AI systems that create art that is different from what we appreciate right now, or current taste, etc. We should design them so as that we make different things that we might appreciate in the future. And so actually having AI systems that are actually different from us and that produce art different from what we like will be adding up to the richness of that experience in itself, because it will add to diversity, etc. So my question is, what if very popular AI systems, such as ChatGPT, generative AI, etc., ends up influencing taste in a matter such as to create some sort of hegemonic styles in art production, and thereby just like diminishing diversity rather than increasing it. So for instance, at some point, everyone started asking ChatGPT to make them pictures and images Ghibli style, like Miyazaki, etc. Isn't there a danger of actually AI art becoming dominant and the type of art produced even by human artists becoming more like what is being produced by AI art, and thereby like losing the value of artistic diversity? What's your take on this?
Okay, good. Yeah, that's a good worry to have. It's partly a practical worry. It's a good worry to have. So I think that we have an interest in diversity. And what exactly does that mean? Like, how much difference should we have? Because if you maximize difference, then you take it down to every individual, right? And then we have nothing in common. And that seems maybe less than ideal. And too little difference, heading towards homogeneity, that's bad as well. I don't have an answer to the question, what's the sweet spot, what's the right level? I don't know if that's even an answerable question. Maybe there's just a zone that we need to be in. But then the worry is that maybe these systems will take us out of that zone. I'm not at all persuaded. So I think that the danger point, okay, I'm going to say something controversial here. The danger point of globalization and homogenization is long gone. So what was driving that was synchronous distribution, basically television. If you wanted to watch television, everybody watched the same thing at the same time. Or everybody in a community watched the same thing at the same time. the internet has driven diversification. It's true that there's a lot of Hello Kitty, but there's also a lot of tiny little niches where little small groups of people are able to do their own thing. And it's because if you had your the thing that you are just fascinated by, that other people in the world are fascinated by, and that's it, just 6 of you. In 1800, you couldn't meet them because chances are they're all over the world. Now you can meet them. And so there's nice studies of Flickr. I don't remember Flickr. So in the old days, there was this thing called Flickr where people would post photographs and would form communities, aesthetic communities, right? Where they're making photographs that have something in common. Sometimes it was like cakes, but sometimes it was, let's make impressionist photographs. And that became very niche. So you would have these thousands of Flickr groups pursuing very narrow interests. They were able to do that because they didn't all have to be in the same place at the same time in order to do it. So asynchronous distribution really serves diversity. And I think that asynchronous prompting does too. So if you want to make some like kooky combination of cubism and Manuelin architecture, you can do it, right? You can use Dali to do that, and you can find a group of people who are into that thing, and you all do it together. So yeah, there's K-pop. K-pop is worldwide popular. I'm totally fine with that there are a lot of people who are into it. That kind of broad appeal is always going to be there. But I also think, just in my observations of the last 20 years, people are losing their head over the internet and how it's going to homogenize everything. It hasn't homogenized everything. It's allowed a lot of room for diversity. There will be a lot of K-pop and a lot of small niche things as well. So that's my prediction. I know we shouldn't make predictions, but the technology seems to me to support that.
Quick follow-up / counter example, the way ChatGPT is influencing the way people write today. There's like some sort of loss of stylistic diversity in the way people write because people are starting to ask ChatGPT for everything and then emulating the style of response that ChatGPT produces when, I don't know, writing emails or whatever. So it has had some sort of homogenizing effect at that level, but yeah, it's a different thing.
Yeah, but you can say, send an email to my boss in the style of Ernest Hemingway, and it will do it.
Other
Change your prompts. If you're creative, make it more creative in your prompts.
Yeah, send an email to the dean in the style of Dostoevsky.
Yeah.
Don't send an email to the dean in the style of Wittgenstein replying to G. Moore or whatever it was, the famous book. Other things, other questions? It is 6. Maybe it's another occasion to put the difference between ancient philosophers and modern philosophers. The ancient philosophers were always talking about food, but thinking about philosophy, whereas we are always talking about food, but talking about philosophy, but thinking about food. So we are waiting for tea time. Is that it?
Yeah.
No final question or remarks. So just please welcome me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again.